begin Mark chapter 5. And where Mark chapter 4 left off with the storm, Mark chapter 5 begins with a different kind of storm, a storm of the soul. So in this chapter, Jesus confronts demonic oppression, illness, chronic illness, and of course, even death itself. And so obviously the question in each of these scenes is, how far does Jesus' authority extend? We've seen his authority over the wind and the waves. That's clear, right? There's no darkness that he cannot enter. There's no impurity that he cannot cleanse. And there's death, he overcomes it. So Jesus here in Mark chapter 6 and his disciples crossed the Sea of Galilee into the region of the Gerasenes, which is largely Gentile territory. And this is really significant because for Jewish readers, the area would represent uncleanness because there's Gentiles, pagan influence, and of course, spiritual darkness. So pigs are being raised in this area, and obviously the pigs are considered unclean under the Mosaic law. The Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Mark intentionally stacks the scene with symbols of impurity. We've got Gentile territory, a man possessed with unclean spirits. He is living among tombs, which one of the laws is you cannot touch dead bodies or dead things. And of course, then they're surrounded by pigs. So everything about the setting screams spiritual exile. They are far from God. And that's exactly where Jesus goes and enters into. The place that is the furthest, the darkest, where no one else wants to go. So a man runs to Jesus from the tombs. And we know that he's been living among the dead. And they try to, kind of encapsulate him. He breaks off chains and he cries day and night and cuts himself. This man is being tortured. Mark describes this very vividly to show the deep bondage. And so when Jesus asks his name, the Spirit responds. And he says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So a Roman legion would contain thousands of soldiers. So this imagery suggests that this man was overwhelmed with oppression, like thousands of demons within him. We see that Jesus has authority over the demonic realm, and it's reflected here because the demons recognize Jesus immediately and they beg him not to torment them. So this obviously shows that Jesus does not negotiate with evil, right? He commands it. He has authority over it. And it echoes the threads from Exodus, where God delivers people from bondage and oppression. But now that bondage and oppression is spiritual. That slavery is spiritual. And so Jesus is acting as the deliverer who can deliver us from spiritual bondage. So the demons enter a herd of pigs and they are thrown into the sea. So again, we've got a couple of symbols here. We've got the pigs, obviously, and they fall off the cliff into what is chaos. Remember, water in this ancient times was chaos. You can't control it. And so chaos literally is delivered into chaos. And evil is expelled, is taken out of this man. And what's amazing is how the man is described afterwards. He's clothed and he's in his right mind. The restoration is complete. Peace has come. The reality of spiritual evil, it's real. And Christ is supreme over it. And he restores, this man is restored because he had an impersonal, real encounter with Jesus. You see, salvation isn't just about moral improvement. It's about freedom. Unfortunately, the town people are afraid, and instead of celebrating the miracle, instead of celebrating that this man who's been tormenting them all, is free, they ask Jesus to leave. Because his transformation and what Jesus did, it disrupted and exposed who they really are in their hearts. Remember, this is Gentile territory, so they are influenced by idols and idol and pagan worship. They have not, that's the culture of their area. There's pigs, and so therefore, they're just living in the midst of uncleanliness. Completely, basically what's happening is they've completely forgotten or chosen not to follow on purpose the law of Moses, and the laws for cleanliness and purity and all of those things. You see, that's where Jesus didn't come to, again, abolish those things. He came to fulfill them, right? And that's what he's doing here. He's fulfilling pure restoration. In the same way that Moses delivered the people from slavery, Jesus is filling those shoes, even to a greater sense. And so they ask him to leave because he exposes what their hearts are just wanting to hold on to instead of moving towards transformation. Because sometimes what happens is that we see transformation, we see restoration, we're at the cusp of it, but we're so we're holding on so tightly to the way of the world, and so we won't move towards the kingdom and live as heirs to God, as his sons and daughters, because we'd rather hold on to this part, this darkness, this what's comfortable, what's easier, what is what can be explained, even what's natural, when we're called to be supernatural. So in the next section of Mark chapter 5, we have the woman with the issue of blood. And we return back to Jewish territory. And there's a synagogue leader. His name is Jairus. And he begs Jesus to heal his daughter, who is dying. And she's 12 years old. And on the way, a woman with a 12-year hemorrhaging problem touches Jesus' garment. You see, under Jewish law, she was unclean and should have been socially isolated. Obviously, she says she spent all her money on physicians, so she has no status, no social standing. And for 12 years, she has lived just by suffering, in suffering. But she keeps saying, if I touch even those garments, I will be made well. And sure enough, she touches him, his garment, and immediately he's healed. She's healed. He says the power comes out of Jesus. So here again, we have the clean and the unclean. And Jesus has the power of authority over it. Just by being touched, the unclean are made clean, right? And it's so opposite. And instead of her defiling him, his holiness restores her. Jesus fulfills and transforms these purity laws because he embodies holiness. There is nothing unclean that can even come near him, neither demons nor blood, right? It's a personal encounter. And Jesus asks then, he says, who touched me? And he's not seeking information, who was it? No, he wants to invite her into relationship. And she comes forward and she's terrified because any other person having been touched by an unclean person, the depravity of it, the compassion of it as well. If she had touched any other rabbi, any other scribe, any other holy man, she would have made them unclean. And that's a whole process. If you remember in the Old Testament, there's a whole process on cleanliness and being clean and how long it would take. And, and he would be unclean until sundown and da-da-da-da-da. But Jesus, uncleanliness does not come near him. It can't affect him because he is holy. He is pure and righteous. And so he turns to her in her fear of what this may mean for her. I mean, it could have been so harsh. And I love this part because instead, my God, Jesus, made man with compassion and love towards this woman who's been suffering, calls her daughter. Can you imagine? This creator of the universe turns and calls her daughter. And it makes me wonder, what had she been cast out of her home? We don't know if she was married. There's a great, I don't know who wrote the sermon, I've heard it once, saying that she had lost so many children. So her womb was closed for that reason, and more than likely had been cast out either from her husband's home, or perhaps she, obviously rejected in some way. Who knows? But the God of all creation turns towards her and says, daughter. This is the only time, friends, in the gospel where Jesus calls someone that. He sees her, and she is his. And it's adoption language, like, you belong to me. It doesn't matter what your father has said to you, or what your husbands have done, or the people who have hurt you and rejected you. You are mine. So then news arrives that the little girl, Jairus' daughter, has died. And they say, why are you troubling him? Isn't that a beautiful juxtaposition? We have a woman who has been rejected, who probably isn't anybody's daughter, maybe hasn't been someone's daughter for a long time. She spent all her money, every cent. She's rejected by everybody. And then here we have a father who goes out of his way. And, who knows if he was ridiculed, if he was, he's up in the ranks of as scribes and a worker of the temple. So he must be somebody important. And he's looking out for his daughter. He doesn't want her to die. And Jesus is the only hope. He's the only way. And Jesus turns to him because everybody's saying, forget it, it's over. And Jesus says, don't fear, just believe. Like this woman for 12 years is healed in a second. Your daughter at 12 years old can also be healed in a second. So he enters the house where Jairus lives, and he says in Hebrew, little girl, wake up, rise up. And she gets up. Immediately, her sickness is gone, just like the woman with the issue of blood. Jesus works with resurrection power. Throughout the Old Testament, this reminds me of Elijah and Elisha, who both of them raised children from the dead. But they prayed for the power, right? Where Jesus just says it, he commands it. And from this point forward, this points obviously to his own resurrection. It just is. Again, we see Jesus' authority over death itself. And it's a preview to the hope that we have in the resurrection. Christ has victory over death and over eternal life, because death is not the final place in the story, right? So overall, Jesus, again, he enters spiritually dark places where people are beyond hope, beyond restoration. Yet our faith matters, because what does he tell Jairus? Just believe. Even if you're afraid, like the woman with the issue of blood, just believe. Your faith matters. Your faith matters. Believe that he is a God who can restore relationships. He can restore our bodies. He can restore everything. Jesus reverses what seems like death, right? Because death doesn't have the ultimate authority. So we move very interestingly throughout this chapter from a graveyard to a sickbed to basically what's a funeral. And in each of those spaces, Jesus brings life and restoration. Which is, it's such a good chapter, right? It's kind of like the best of, some of my favorite stories. So overall, Jesus cares about people who are rejected, and faith, even small faith, it really does matter. He is God to the hopeless.